Welcome to another episode of Just Cooking. I'm your host, Bassam Alawi, aka B. The Maker on Instagram of Darcine Cafe at the Bahrain National Museum. Today, I have one of my favorite, also most simple dishes that I'd like to present to you guys and teach you how to make, but I'm gonna do it with a slight twist, right? And it is what is locally called balalit, which is in reference to these vermicelli or vermicelli noodle or pasta noodle that is used in this dish, ladies and gentlemen. And this is not something that grows or is made in Bahrain. This is technically an import. And I'm going to be referring to Dr. Dalal al-Sharougi, a Bahraini food anthropologist here, who mentioned to me in passing at one point that this was actually an import during the Gulf War. And this dish came about out of necessity and not necessarily because we wanted to make it, right? But it turned out great just the same. Now the ingredients are fairly simple and there's a lot of aromatics in this one. When we come back, I'm going to talk to you about it. So the ingredients of this dish have and incorporate some of the best aromatics that I think exist in the world, right? And they are very much used in Bahraini cuisine and definitely a staple of Ramadan in terms of their scent and the memories associated with them, right? So they are as follows, and I'm just going to go through these very quickly. We have some saffron that I've soaked in some really nice distilled rose water. We have some butter, really good quality butter I'm using here, some organic eggs. There is sugar in this recipe, but if you don't like sugar, you can always replace it with another sweetener like honey or maple syrup. But I like to use sugar. I know it's not the most healthy, but it does give you a cleaner flavor, right? And allows for all those spices that we're gonna be adding and aromatics to kind of show. I've got a bit of salt, pepper, and most importantly, some cardamom powder, which is key when you're making good balalit. What I'm gonna be making is I'm gonna incorporate 3 phases to this dish, right? There is the salted omelet with a bit of pepper and some cardamom. There is the softened sweet vermicelli that is cooked in the saffron and the cardamom. But what I'm gonna do differently is I'm gonna take some of that vermicelli, mix it up with some eggs, bit of cornstarch, and make like tiny discs, crispy vermicelli balalit discs that add a bit of crunch, which I think go really well with this recipe. So let us begin. So what I have here, and using freshly sanitized hands, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna add a bit of butter. This pan is relatively hot. Don't be afraid of the butter. Now sometimes people don't do this. They just boil the water, add the noodles in. But I like to add a tiny bit of butter because I feel it gives it a very nutty flavor, also a richness that I find delicious in this dish. When we're back, I'm gonna continue making it because I can't find one of my big spoons that I really like. See you in a bit. So the butter is starting to soften. I can already smell that nutty aroma, but I'm not gonna let it brown. You can if you want to, just make sure you don't burn it. What we're gonna do, just increase the heat on the hob, right? With that nice beepy sound that we all love from an induction oven. And I'm gonna add about 250 grams, more or less, of this vermicelli, right? And I'm gonna saute it. I like to saute it because I feel, again, more flavor, more nutty texture, more nutty flavor, more brown texture, is what I'm trying to say. Just gonna give that a mix. And once I feel that I can smell that like nut smell, right? That's when I know that we're ready to add all the spices and aromatics and finish it off with some water so that it boils. We're not gonna add too much water to this dish. You don't want this to be a soupy noodle. You want this to be as dry as possible. You can add the water gradually. I have about 500 ml, but I don't think I'll be using all of that quantity, right? I'm gonna gauge what I think it needs. Now, as this cooks, let's bring over the spices. I have the cardamom, and again, this is important. But before I do so, I have some cinnamon. Now, this is not a conventional, not a lot of people like to use it, but I do. And I like to use it in this phase of the cooking. I think 2 of these sticks would be fine. And a bit of those cardamom pods, whole cardamom pods. When we both add powdered form and whole. The whole doesn't give you a very strong aroma, but because the cardamom pods are ground up, the essential oils are more activated, so you get to smell the aromatic principles in the dish, right? I'll give that a mix. Excellent. When I feel like that's starting to sizzle, we can begin. In the meantime, I'm gonna prep this pan and we're gonna make our quick omelets. See you in a bit. So the vermicelli and the spices and the butter have been crisping up, and you see some of those bits have turned nice and brown. I'm gonna take a paper towel just so that I can hold on to that rim. It is relatively hot. and my towels aren't here yet. So just give that a mix. And I want it to be golden, you guys. I don't want it to be dark brown. And I think we're actually ready for all the rest of the stuff, all the rest of the deliciousness. So I'm gonna add about a teaspoon and a half of ground cardamom. And this is important. You cannot not use this, right? Now, one of the reasons I love this dish so much, it has 4 of my favorite spices. Cinnamon, also known as darsin, well, colloquially anyways. Rose, in terms of the rose water, saffron, and cardamom. All of these kind of spices. So the vermicelli has gotten a really nice color, and I think now is the time, post adding a bit of cardamom powder, to add the liquid portion of the dish. And this is just plain old water. It's room temperature. It's not heated. I will let it come to a boil. And like I said earlier, I'm just gonna add enough to kind of cover this to a point where I feel it'll absorb it, but not turn too soupy, right? I think that's pretty good. There you go. Just a little bit more. Gonna push all of that down. And now is the time to add a bit of that sugar, which will dissolve in the water as it's heated. This is about half a cup of sugar, right? And I know that it seems like a lot, maybe a little more than half a cup actually. I'm not gonna add all of it, just half of it for now. Give it a taste as I go. Because not everybody likes this dish like at certain sweetness levels. Some people like it way sweeter, some people like it less sweet. I'm the guy who likes it a little less sweet, because I feel like you get to appreciate it more and enjoy eating it. And plus you don't want that sugar bomb early in the morning, right? There we go, just gonna give that a mix. Already the vermicelli is softening. It's beautiful looking. I'm gonna mix that up, taste the sugar, which as that water reduces is gonna turn into like a syrupy texture. And I still have a tiny bit more water to add in the form of that distilled rose water, and I've soaked it. I mean, look at those saffron. I went a little overboard with the saffron because I love it so much. Just the smell, the combination of that rose and saffron together makes something magical, you guys. So now I'm gonna use that spoon and taste the sugar level in this mixture. For me, that's perfect. However, for camera, I will add a tiny bit more sugar, right? Now, add a little bit of this. So the flavors I tasted a tiny bit of cardamom, that cinnamon, all those beautiful spices, the sugar, and the nuttiness of the vermicelli and the butter come through really nicely. Again, just give this a quick mix. Remember, you guys, you don't have to use a 1:2 ratio in terms of vermicelli to liquid, right? You want it to be like kind of falling apart and not stuck together. Nobody likes that. It's easier to eat as well. Plus, when they are not stuck together, we can actually mix that up with our eggs and they're gonna look great. So as this comes to a boil, let me prepare our eggs. I'm gonna take a clean paper towel. I have some vegetable oil in here, but it's a non-stick pan anyways, and I'm not gonna like go nuts with the oil. Just gonna give it a rub. And the pan is really quite hot. So before I pour the eggs, I will move them to the side, like so. Now, I got a little bowl here, and I'm gonna do this omelet like one at a time, because I don't want it to go, you know, all one big omelet. We want separate individual omelets, so you got enough for everybody to eat. So I got those eggs, perfect. I'm gonna take my whisk, whisk that up. There you go, beautiful looking. Lovely. You wanna get it as uniform as possible. This is a big pan, so this might go south, ladies and gentlemen. Since I'm gonna be using this bowl for eggs as well, I don't mind that egg is in there, right? Now I'm gonna add a tiny bit of salt. There we go. The salt and the sweet of the vermicelli works wonderfully together. And I've chosen to use white pepper. You can use black pepper. I like to use white pepper because you don't get those like black flecks in the omelet. Just give that a mix. Perfect. And you want these as flat, as thin as possible. Now in case I bung this up, we might have to do it again, but let's see. Pour it right there in the middle, shake it around, get it as coated as possible. Now hopefully this will unstick from this, right? Lovely. I want to get them like almost like a crepey consistency, right? And as this starts to cook and the sides come off the edge, I'm gonna kind of fold them together, right? Already, I love that. I love the whites, I love the string of just a tiny bit of yellow in there. I'm gonna use my spatula just to work that edge to the bottom. Now, when I tasted this earlier using a spoon, and I have many spoons and I go through them like crazy, right? Because I love to taste food as I go along. Although in time, your fingers tend to memorize, there is that kind of memory. Lovely, look at that. I'm gonna use a new spoon because there's no double dipping. I'm gonna taste it yet again. I think that's wonderful. I would add a tiny bit more cardamom. Cardamom, well, there's some research, we don't know just yet, that it's actually pretty good for your heart. And rose, well, rose is a natural antidepressant. Just the smell opens up your heart, and that is exactly what you need in this holy month. So, that omelet is coming together. I think we need to increase the heat on that. There we go. We're gonna scrape it, try and get it off. There we go. Look at that. And it's nice and seasoned too, right? And for the next one, I will add a tiny bit more cardamom to the eggs, not to this dish. All right, when we come back, I would have attempted to scrape this egg off the pan, fold it up, and put it on the side. See you in a bit. So I've basically gone through all of my eggs, right? And I'm making these very slim and thin omelets, which is the way I like them. I mean, some people like them really thick. I do not. I think they're way easier to eat if they look like this. Paper thin, beautifully seasoned, salt, white pepper, a bit of cardamom, which is more traditional. I'm gonna let this cook. And as you can see, I've made a couple right here. We're gonna dress those up. Now, our vermicelli or balalit has kind of taken shape. Now what people do, I like it this texture, but if you want it more kind of al dente and separated, you can boil the pasta before adding the sugar. The sugar creates a syrupy texture that kind of allows it to clump up together. If you don't like that, boil first, drain, then add your sugar. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna make the base of those little vermicelli balalit croquettes that I talked to you about. And I have with me here just a simple bowl with a whisk, and I'm gonna take just a little bit of this stuff, this beautiful looking balalit. I'm just gonna add it to the bowl. We're gonna crack an egg on this, add a tiny bit more sugar and a bit of salt. Always add a tiny bit of salt when you're doing something sweet. It just brings out the flavor. And don't worry about the omelet. It's gonna kind of cook gently, and then it's gonna have a golden crust. We're gonna roll it on top of each other and lay it out like this. All right, so let me add a bit of vermicelli. I think that's good. So this is about for one egg to make one croquette, right? Gonna bring this to the side right here. Oh, I keep turning this thing on and turning this thing off. It is a pain, but we'll get through it as we do most things. Right, move this to the side. So I've taken that small quantity of the main balalit that I've made, or vermicelli, and I've added it to the side. By the way, before this was done, I did pour the saffron rosewater mixture. Now rosewater is very delicate. You don't want to boil it. That's why you add the saffron and the rosewater at the end and not in the beginning. If you boil it, and cook it with the vermicelli, you've lost all that rose flavor. I've also left just a little bit, tiny bit in here because I'm going to just sprinkle it on top as a garnish. Now, what are we going to do with our vermicelli? I'm going to take one egg. This quantity of vermicelli is pretty good for one egg. I'm going to crack this in there. There we go. Make sure there's no shell. I'm gonna clean my hands because I got a bit of egg on them. There we go, nice and clean. I'm gonna give this a whisk. And the egg is there as a binder, ladies and gentlemen. And you want there to be more vermicelli than there is egg. And I'm gonna make sure to prepare this before this is done. I think that's perfect. Now, what I'm gonna do that I find always adds more crispness to egg is just add a tiny bit of cornstarch. Not too much, maybe half a teaspoon of cornstarch is more than enough because we're only gonna make 2 vermicelli or balalit croquettes, right? I'm gonna mix that up to make sure it's evenly distributed. Perfection. And then I'm gonna add a tiny bit of seasoning, the salt I told you about, followed by the sugar. At this point, you can add a bit of cardamom because you've diluted the flavor of the vermicelli with the eggs. So why not? Let's do that. So I add a touch of cardamom. There we go. And now a tiny bit of sugar. There we go. That's about a teaspoon and a half, nothing crazy. Again, I don't like this cloyingly sweet. Some people do, and that's okay. Live your best life. So these eggs are kind of done now. And this is a non-stick pan, but it's not Teflon based, which is good because that's not good for you. we're just gonna loosen it up just from the sides like so. There we go, it's coming together. I'm just gonna roll it off the pan, right? And it's gonna soften. You might feel, oh, that's a little too hard, that's inedible. Don't worry about it. Once it steams up, it'll be the right consistency. When I'm back, I'm gonna add a tiny bit of oil in this pan and fry up those croquettes. See you in a bit. So I've added a bit of the vegetable oil, and I don't want too much because this is already a non-stick, and it's a ceramic non-stick. And all those kind of vermicelli, egg mixture, just gonna add it in there and spread it as thinly as possible so I get a nice semicircular croquette type thing, all right? Or crispy vermicelli pancake, if you will. I'm gonna let this cook. And then what you can do is once this crisps up on one side and it's very light, it has that texture, you can cut it in half and set it aside. I'm gonna present this the way I liked it to be presented. Usually, this dish is served with vermicelli noodles on the bottom and some eggs on the top, and they garnish it with a bit of sugar, a bit of cardamom, a bit of rose water, maybe some more sugar syrup. Whatever the case may be, you can do whatever you like. It's your day, it's your family. Okay, this is crisping up nicely, like so. I love that. I love that smell, and the scent is just coming up. I am actually gonna add a tiny bit more cardamom because I want a stronger scent. There we go, just a little bit. And cardamom is the main aromatic in this dish. The saffron and the rose, for me at least, are kind of the backseat drivers, and that's okay. When we're back, I would have made a couple of these, well, maybe perhaps maybe two, cut them in half, and we're gonna plate this up, and it's gonna look amazing. See you in a bit. So I've taken my croquette off the heat and I've put it in this little plate, right? And I've cut a beautiful, nice little piece. And this is the second croquette. As you can see, the remainder are right there, garnished beautifully. I'm gonna take this piece with my freshly sanitized hands. Just gonna lay it gently, just for some aesthetic, purposes under there. So when you look at that dish, and just look at it head on, it looks great. And what I'm gonna do now is remember those saffron threads and the rose water. I'm gonna use some of those right on the vermicelli, because look at that. I want some of those threads and that rose water without exposure to heat, so it preserves its flavor at this point, to kind of infuse the vermicelli and give it just another layer of flavor. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is my balalid, aka Bahraini vermicelli noodles, cooked with saffron, cardamom, rose water, with some nice omelets, cooked the same way, slightly salted, finished off with a nice vermicelli croquette. It's crispy, it's delicious. You can't miss this one. And you can have this during Ramadan or on the first day of Eid, so it works both ways. Be sure to make this. Everybody's gonna love you for it. And it's a new take on an already, present classic. Remember, have a blessed Ramadan, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay grateful, and make this. See ya.